Ladies and gentlemen, to proceed with today's event, it is my honor to invite Mr. Amin Ahmad to deliver the welcoming remarks. Please welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil karim. Our honorable guest, Yang Hormat Datuk Amin, our Deputy Foreign Minister of Malaysia, esteemed delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my profound gratitude to the Islam and Liberty Network for graciously inviting me. Malaysia is honored to serve as the host nation for the second time, and it is indeed a moment of pride as we mark the 10th seminar since the inception of the Islam and Liberty Network roughly 12 years ago. In the same spirit, we had also just celebrated our 66th Merdeka or Independence Day last week, and in 10 days we will be celebrating our 60th Malaysia Day. The chosen theme for this conference, Peace and Prosperity in Muslim majority countries and beyond, couldn't be more pertinent. The modern world, including Malaysia, is undergoing pivotal shift. The discussion over the next 3 days will be addressed the myriad of pressing issues that have arisen in the recent years. These challenges are not exclusive to Muslim majority countries with their varied political system. They extend to well-established democracies and beyond. We are thus not just discussing these challenges, but ideating on restoring political stability, global peace, economic prosperity, and the dignity of every individual. Only then can we ensure the overall well-being of all. Being a Muslim, I deeply believe in our mission of Rahmatan lil Alamin. It's close to your name, yeah, Deputy Minister. To be a mercy unto the world. It is our duty to embed this mission in the framework of our national and societal policies. And it's indeed an ideal foundation for our deliberations in the coming days. However, before we dive deep into discussions, let's briefly address the elephant in the room. The Muslim world is rich in resources and cultural heritage, yet a significant portion of its population grapples with poverty, homelessness, and the scars of extremism, autocratic rules, corruption, and political instability. Many view democracy with skepticism, associating it with taghut or transgression, yet democracy in its purest sense is merely a means to elect leaders. Consider this. As of 2021, the Muslim majority countries hold approximately 60% of the world's oil reserve and 50% of natural gas reserve. Yet, according to United Nations Development Programme, over 30% of the population in the Middle Eastern region alone, which is predominantly Muslim, live below the poverty line. Such stark disparities push us to introspect on the gap between our potential and our realities. The path to becoming Rahmatan lil Alamin is fraught with challenges. Our journey is incomplete without ensuring access to quality healthcare and education for all, basic infrastructure like potable water, food, and housing. In conclusion, as we gather here from 15 different nations, I was informed by the organizer, I hope that beyond this seminar, you will seize the opportunity to explore the vibrant city of Kuala Lumpur, embrace the diverse cultures, food, arts, and languages that our beautiful nation have to offer. Once again, I extend a warm welcome to all delegates present today. Let's embark on this journey of introspection, understanding, and collaborative action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amin, for the meaningful speech. Before we proceed further, it is important to understand the context behind our historic conference today. Allow me to invite Mr. Ali Salman, Chief Executive Officer of Islam and Liberty Network Foundation, on the stage. Please welcome.
Can we start the presentation? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and a very good morning to all of you. I am pleased to see a hall full of very vibrant intellectuals, researchers, economists, and leaders of Malaysia, and also 15 plus other countries to join our conference. So I welcome you again here. I'm very grateful to Deputy Foreign Minister Datuk Muhammad Al-Amin for your gracious presence, Lord Syed Kamall, one of the founding members of the network, for coming all over from UK and join our conference, our good old friend Amin Ahmad and Shamshir Alam, who is part of the ILN board and the council, your excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are marking the 10th International Conference of Islam and Liberty Network, and I thought this is an excellent occasion for me to give you an overview of what we have been doing or what we plan to do under the platform is this network, which is originally founded. We can run the slides. It started as an informal network, back in 2011 in the city of Istanbul, but we got incorporated as a Malaysian foundation in 2016. And since have been organizing ourselves into various countries with the sole mission of advancing the ideas and policies for religious, economic, and political freedoms. And we believe that these freedoms are compatible with our understanding of Islam. And this is something which Muslim societies and also the other countries, of course, need to understand as well. The next slide. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Now, before I come back, before I share the thoughts about the philosophy, I'd like to quote a noted Malaysian intellectual, Professor Shah Salim Faruqi, who had shared his comments about this conference, and I'm quoting him. Your conference comes at a critical time in Malaysia when Islam is being abused to divide society, question multiculturalism, and denigrate the constitution and the civil courts. A monolithic theocratic state is being put forward as the Muslim utopia in what was up to now a plural state, unquote. As I have lived in Malaysia and worked here for many years, I'm familiar that whenever this word of liberty comes in, images of impiety and immorality are often invoked. In contrast, we use this word as a political theory. At the most basic level, individual liberty or personal freedom does not give us a license to do whatever one wishes, but rather protection against coercion from others. Thus, we use a negative view of freedom. It implies that all human beings have certain inalienable rights and fundamental rights that are bestowed upon none other than their creator. In this sense, all human beings are equal. Once established, these rights have profound consequences for relationship between individuals and society, and individuals and state, more to do with the state itself. It leads us to conclude that as individuals, we are free to make our choices in our economic, religious, and political lives. Any central human authority or state which restricts these freedoms in whatever name becomes illiberal. For us, a free society is both a cause and effect of peace and prosperity. This is a bit dense for the morning, but I'll just explain in concrete terms what it means when we use the word free society or unfree society. To the next slide. So, our job is to create, as a network, as a foundation, our job is to create the intellectual conditions for these debates. If you look at this table, you will see how I have contrasted the so-called unfree society, which is characterized by hierarchies and exclusion, dictatorships, central planning, religious authoritarianism, and a big government with high taxes. Now, obviously, these are the prototype. Right? So there is no perfect representation of an unfree society anywhere in the world, just like there is no unique model of a perfect free society in this world. But just to understand that by free society we mean, as I said, about human equality and inclusion, democracy, free markets, religious freedom and diversity, limited government with low tax rates. These are the kinds of ideas and policies that we are promoting through our discourses, conferences, and events in different countries since our foundation. We can move to the next slide. And we can skip to the annual program. So what we do here, we do a conference like this every year. This is our 10th international conference. We also do a summer training workshop. We do local programs, both virtually and in person, webinars, podcasts, and articles. Our current projects include Tunisia Economic Network. We have many speakers from Tunisia, and which you will be hearing later in the discourse during this conference. In Tunisia, we are focusing as like the only Arab country which have successfully graduated as a democratically in terms of democratic transition. Although it's now facing its own challenges, and we figured out that unless we contribute to improve the economic situation in countries like Tunisia, even the democratic stability becomes a question mark. Then we are working to build a project in Afghanistan. We are publishing an annual index, and then we are also training like civil society activists and other leaders. Just to give you a snapshot of our history, many faces you will recognize in these days here who were present in Istanbul back in 2011, including a young person there on the right side. The next slide gives you a snapshot of our conferences. We can move quickly to the... Now, this was our online conference. The next one was last year in Turkey. So how do we operate? Right? So you will see this material, the contents, all available on our website, freely accessible. So we believe that these ideas that we are promoting have consequences for our understanding and broadly to improve the public perception and the policy influence itself. So there was a book which we published based on the deliberations in the past conferences and some other papers, which is available. And then we are not restricting ourselves to the book alone, but we take these books and convert them into discussions at local level in universities. As you can see some examples here in Europe, in Malaysia, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan. Next slide. For instance, we were in 2018. We can do the next slide. In Iran, where we had a very lively discussion about these issues in Qom, talking about Islam and liberty. And the next slide will take you to the books which we have published. All of the contents are available on our website, so you can access. The next slide takes you about to our work in Afghanistan and Nigeria. We have also published translations many years ago by Early Islam, by the book by Benedict Kohler, Early Islam and the Birth of Capitalism. Again, I think what is important is not just the ideas, but how do we convert these ideas into concrete agendas and think tanks, which we have been doing in different parts of the world. We can move next. And then what is more important for us, and what we realize from experience, that as we interact with the young scholars, activists, they become also a part of our network. And you will see later meet Tasneem Idris. She's here as our associate director. We were doing a workshop in Tunisia and she got interested in our work. We have next, we can move to the next slides. Yeah. Our friend Ali Hasnia, he is present today from Iran, and he's going to make a presentation, and he got an inspiration and advanced his discussions in Iran in his university. Move to the next slide. Yeah. And then lastly, I would like to talk about the team itself. Next slide. This is the member of the council here. Muhammad Amin is the chairman. And then the other members today, many members are present, including Suad, Shamshir, Ozlem, Dr. Husnul Amin, who are present in this conference. And then we have a network of fellows in different countries. Again, you will be getting a chance to meet them during these 2 days. Next is the advisory board. You just heard from Amin Ahmad, and of course you will hear shortly from Lord Syed Kamall himself. And then we got a team, a small team, but I think a very efficient team. We all work in different countries, but thanks to technology we are able to organize these activities in an efficient manner. Now, one can ask, how do we measure the impact of this work? Right, so, and we try to quantify the results, which we, in terms of the outreach, and as you can see, it is quantified in terms of the conferences, the number of views, articles, which we have, made available on our social media, and as well as, very importantly, expanding human resources and the network, where we did recent estimates, and we believe that more than 2 million people have accessed our material on various sources. And lastly, if you like what we are doing, you can choose to do any of these. At the minimum, I thought you can be interested in going to our website, follow the social media accounts like Twitter, Instagram, and follow us and share the work. If you're interested in talking about these issues through our platform, we welcome you. Please get in touch with me or my colleagues here. We can do a podcast with you, a webinar, or a lecture. You're also welcome to contribute in these discussions on our website. And of course, you're also welcome to contribute to the work financially. So this is the idea of the network, and I believe that in next 2 days, you will be hearing presentations and lectures and papers talking about not just the theoretical aspect of the combination of Islam and liberty, but also the policy manifestation, as well as the challenges that we face, particularly in Muslim majority countries. And I hope that you find your time well invested here, and I look forward to your inputs and contribution in this conference. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Mr. Ali Salman, for the insightful opening and introduction to ILN. Now, it is my pleasure to invite Lord Syed Kamall, member of UK House of Lords, ILN co-founder, to give his speech. Please welcome.
Well, assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I want to thank you all for being here, and this is an amazing project and network that I'm very proud to still be a member of. And I thought what I would do today, if it's okay with you, is just reflect on some of the early days of the network and how far it has come, and from my personal experiences. So my first child, or if my wife was here, she would say our first child, was born at the end of August 2001. And at the time, I was fortunate enough to be self-employed, so I was working at home, and that was a great blessing as a new parent, to be able to be at home with my newly born son. And even if I was sometimes working at the same time, And one day I was holding him in my arm, on one arm, and I was working and doing my emails in the other arm, with the other hand, when an email arrived from a friend. And he said, switch on the television, a plane has crashed into a building in New York. And as the events of that day unfolded, the 11th of September 2001, it became clear that this was an attack on not only the World Centre, but on our system of liberty and democracy. But also, for me, what was troubling, and for many people, many of us here, was that this was being done in the name of Islam, my faith, the faith of many people here today. And I hugged my son very tightly, because I was worried about what sort of world he would grow up in. I had taken it for granted that my parents had come as immigrants to live in the UK. There were many immigrants from many countries in the US, elsewhere, and there was really, we were free to practice our faith. And of course there were troubles and tensions at times, especially with the first generation, but I felt very comfortable living in London, being able to practice my faith freely with friends, and I went to school with friends of many different faiths, and of no faith, and we understood each other. And I really worried about the world that my son was going to grow up in, and I worried about two sets of people who I thought stood to gain from this atrocious act of terrorism. First, it was the extremists who misrepresent Islam and recruit young people to become terrorists and carry out acts in the name of Islam against not only non-Muslims, but Muslims as well. And people often forget that there were Muslim victims of 9/11, and same with 7/7. There were Muslim victims in London of 7/7. But also I was worried about the neoconservatives who deliberately misrepresent Islam to suggest that Muslims are the enemy. And I worried that both sides would gain from what happened at 9/11, and there would create divisions between Muslims and non-Muslims. And so all sorts of thoughts entered my mind that day, as you can imagine. And while it may sound silly now, I did wonder whether it would be safe to bring up my children in the UK as a Muslim. Now, looking back, at the time you might think, well, don't be silly, but at the time many of us were genuinely worried, would this cause divisions? And I worried that the hostilities that Muslims might face, the backlash, not only where I live in the UK, but where my parents lived in the US, and the world that we would see beyond that. And at the time I had no real platform. I had been a political candidate. I'd stood for election 4 times and lost 4 times. In fact, before I got elected, I stood for 5 times and lost 5 elections. But every time you just have to get up and dust yourself off. I just left a job to become self-employed. So I began discussions in my various networks of people I'd met about the perception that the fact that we took freedoms for granted, and that there was no inherent contradiction between Islam and freedom, Islam and liberty. And I spoke with Muslims and non-Muslims to understand what we could do about this. Now, fortunately, even though we did face some problems in the years after 9/11, it wasn't as bad as I thought it could be with the divisions. And I'm not saying it was easy. I know from personal experience how difficult it was for many Muslims to travel internationally, especially someone like me whose parents live in the US. And with the sort of conversations or the interviews you had from border control in many countries, we knew there was suspicion. And I know also that for many Muslims that their mail was being intercepted and opened in those years. Mail was often delayed or did not get delivered. But it wasn't as bad as I thought it could become. And in 2005, I became a member of the European Parliament. And even being a backbench politician gave me a platform. And I received invitations to travel and speak all over the world. And in one case, and a few times, I was invited to Washington, D.C. to address groups of American politicians, but also to address groups of think tanks. And there I was able to pursue my interest in the battle of ideas of Islam, and meet also with those non-Muslims who wrongly saw our faith in the wrong light. I spoke to think tanks in Washington. Maybe with hindsight they were not the right ones to speak to, but I had the conversations. Discourse is very important. And one of the problems was some of the think tanks would invite former Muslims to come along and speak, and they would give speeches along the line of, I was a Muslim, but I've left Islam because Islam is full of terrorists, or it's an evil religion. And you could make a good living, actually, at the time in America, given those sort of speeches. There were many books written by former Muslims who said Islam is inherently evil, I was a Muslim, I left the faith. And when I was in these seminars, I would challenge them, but it was clear that they had an anti-Islam agenda. I also remember speaking to a Bush administration official who was not anti-Muslim, but he told me that they had a strategy worked out. It was a hearts and minds strategy. And maybe I'm being slightly unfair, but I could characterize this hearts and minds strategy as simply, first we bomb them, and then we build hospitals, schools, and new homes for them. And I say that it's much more than that, really. We have to engage in the battle of ideas, and the battle of ideas is never over. Now, to be fair, I also met some amazing people. Some of you will know Ahmad, who runs the Minaret of Freedom Foundation in the US, and there are other liberty-minded Muslims in the US, but also across the world, many of you who are here today. But what I really needed was someone who understood the battle of ideas and how we stop people being indoctrinated into an extreme view of Islam, stopping them becoming terrorists, but also to reach out to Muslims themselves and non-Muslims to show that there was no inherent contradiction between Islam and liberty. Now, going back, when I was a PhD student many years ago, I used to be invited to the Institute of Economic Affairs, the leading classical liberal think tank in the UK, set up in 1955. I now work part-time there. I was at one time the academic and research director. And we see ourselves as the sort of, to be gender neutral, to be gender fair, we see ourselves either as the granddaddy of all classical liberal think tanks, or we see ourselves as a mothership. So we cover both genders there. And I was very fortunate. There was a wonderful Director General there at the moment, a guy called John Blundell, who some of you will know. And he wanted to encourage classically liberal-minded students. And we kept in touch over the years. And years later, when I mentioned to him my thoughts on Islam and that we needed something, a global network of Muslims who believed in liberty, he put me in touch with the wonderful person that many of you will know, Linda Whetstone, incredibly inspirational, who sadly passed away not very long ago, or maybe a bit longer than that, but in fact, at a Liberty conference in Miami. And may she rest in peace. And I'd met her at the IEA previously, but I had no idea what a force of nature and what a force of good she was. Immediately, she organised a meeting at the IEA with me, with Wan Saiful, with Julian Morris of the IPN, who worked at the IEA offices. And Linda understood it straight away. I didn't even have to explain it to her. We spoke about which think tanks we could work with. She knew many of them. She convinced the Liberty Fund, a wonderful organisation, to organise a Liberty Fund seminar on Islam in liberty in Istanbul and elsewhere. And after which, we set up, as Ali Salman has told you, the Istanbul Network for Liberty, which later became the Islam and Liberty Network. And some of you I can see were at that meeting, where I met Muslim and non-Muslim sisters and brothers who had been thinking along similar lines. I was not alone, and I'm not claiming to be alone. There were many of us who thought in that way. Now, over the years, working with Linda Whetstone, she encouraged translations of classical liberal texts into different languages. She found funders and distributors, and she also worked with the Atlas Network. Incidentally, her father, Anthony Fisher, founded both the Institute of Economic Affairs, but also the Atlas Network. But also there were barriers that we had to overcome. And I remember one time there was a wonderful book. I had been out to Côte d'Ivoire with the Westminster Foundation for Democracy to give a summer school on the principles of a free society, a wonderful book written by Dr. Nigel Ashford, who some of you will know. And I asked him for permission, and can we translate this book into Arabic, Farsi, French, other languages, so people can read this book? And while he was in favour, unfortunately the think tank that had published the papers were very suspicious. And I was getting incredibly frustrated, but not for Linda. Linda was always a thinker who found a way around problems. So what she did, she immediately commissioned another book called Foundations of a Free Society, and she found an author called Eamon Butler to write that book. And now many of you I know have read the translated versions of that in many languages. Now, when I look back, while I was excited to be a co-founder, I'm one of those people who really likes to start things but let others get on and do it. Partly because I don't think they want me to be around telling them I would have done it that way. I think it's best that you set these things up, but I wanted the network to exist. It wasn't about me or Britain, it was about Muslims. Now Linda searched, and also I was very aware that a network like this should not be run from someone based in the UK or the USA or even Europe. Because those people who disagree with us about our liberal interpretation of Islam would say that we were an agent of the West, or that we were run by security agencies or whatever. I thought it was important that it was seen, and it is, a network run by Muslims, with works written by Muslims, but not based in the West. Now, Linda searched for a CEO, and I'm so proud and grateful that she found our brother Ali Salman. I wouldn't say found, I mean, it's like, a bit like people who say they discovered America. There were people there before, you know. And he agreed to move to Malaysia and to be based at Ideas here in Malaysia to run the network. And I think, at this point, I think it's really important to acknowledge the role that Malaysia has played in this. And I see, you know, the Deputy Foreign Minister here, and really to thank Malaysia, because it's a country that respects democratic choices, economic freedom and religious diversity. And Ali Salman tells me Malaysia has always welcomed the work of the Islam and Liberty Network, and I think we should express our gratitude for that. And over the years, we've seen the network grow, and I've simply been in awe of the amazing work that you've done in many countries, and we saw many examples on those slides. I think of the workshops on freedom in rural Pakistan and Afghanistan. For women, I think of the translations into Farsi, into Arabic, into Dari, into all the other languages, but especially your conferences, where Muslims from around the world can come together and discuss ideas of liberty. Not only translate texts like from Hayek and others, but also look at our own rich Islamic history and think of people like, for example, Ibn Khaldun or Ibn Rushd and others, who we can use as a basis for that liberty in Islam. And once again, we had Linda helping us. I've heard stories of Linda and the ILN overcoming obstacles, such as, for example, when there were problems getting books to go across borders and suspicious border guards, she just simply put the books on CDs and distributed the CDs, and so people could have access to them. Remember, this is the day before broadband internet everywhere. And also, maybe changing the translation slightly to make sure the same meaning was intended, but they didn't offend the authorities. It was all about getting the message there. It wasn't about upsetting people. And I also admire the partnerships that ILN has formed with Ideas, obviously here in network, here, with think tanks across the world, with individuals across the world, many of you who are in this room, with the Acton Institute in the US, who have now set up, as a result of the work, the Collins Center for Abrahamic Faiths. And they run a monthly majlis, an online discussion, but many other projects I have not mentioned. But I also know that I was not the only one who worried about the impact of 9/11 and how Islam would be perceived by non-Muslims. Also worried about how Muslims themselves would be treated, but also about how we engage on that battle of ideas in Islam. And I know that many of you worried about that too, and I know that I'm very grateful that many of you stepped up and played your role. For a number of years, I've not been able to join you at the Islam and Liberty Network conferences. Some of you will know I was a member of the European Parliament. I became a leader, a group leader. Obviously, that kept me busy. When I went back to the UK and was appointed to the House of Lords, I was asked to be a minister for a year or so. And so I always had to turn down the invitations. The invitations kept coming, which was wonderful, but I was unable to join you. So I'm very pleased now that I'm once against a backbencher, and I also work at the IA, in fact, on this very area. My task at the Institute of Economic Affairs is the academic and international outreach. So I look forward to seeing you and meeting many of you as possible to see how we can help you. And we've also taken over some of Linda Whetstone's work with a network of free societies. And we want to talk to as many of you as possible. If there are texts that you want translated, how we can help you to distribute those and make sure that this message is spread wider. And I hope to continue working with you as long as our Maker allows me to continue to live and to continue the vital work that you do. So let me end by saying a big thank you, first of all, to two people who are not here, Linda Whetstone, who sadly passed on, and Julian Morris, who was there at our initial discussions in London to talk about this network. Let me thank Ali, Tasnim, Bashir, and the wonderful team at ILN. I'm sorry I haven't mentioned you all, for the wonderful work that they do. And let me thank all of you for being part of this network and for hoping that the work continues and we just grow bigger and bigger and spread these ideas more. And the reason I want to thank you, because the work is inspirational. I think it continues to inspire me. It continues to inspire fellow non-Muslims. And it also continues to inspire our non-Muslim brothers and sisters. May Allah bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the wonderful speech, Lord Syed Kamall. Please remain on stage. Sorry. Yeah, my apology. The mic. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Shamsir Alam on stage to present a token of appreciation to Lord Syed Kamall.
You should always give me it after, at the end, otherwise I might go home now. Yeah, no,
Thank you, Mr. Shamsir Alam and Lord Syed Kamall. Ladies and gentlemen, it is unfortunate for us that His Excellency Dr. Zambry Abdul Kadir is not able to attend our conference physically today because of his presence at the ASEAN Summit required by the Prime Minister. However, he has kindly recorded his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now play a recording of keynote address from His Excellency Dr. Zambry Abdul Kadir.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and Salam Malaysia Madani. I would like to congratulate the board and management of Islam and Liberty Network Foundation for organizing its 10th International Conference on Peace and Prosperity in Muslim majority countries and beyond. I welcome all international delegates to Malaysia, and I hope you all enjoy your stay here and get a chance to see beautiful Kuala Lumpur and other cities. As a Malaysian, I feel honored that your organization has chosen Malaysia as a venue of its 10th International Conference. As a developing nation, Malaysia has a unique history. As a Southeast Asian nation, Malaysia was historically a peaceful place which offered a hub for regional trade. After its independence, Malaysia has emerged as a pluralist, progressive and prosperous country. A unique feature of our history is that we are the only country in OIC members countries providing a foundation of political stability through continuous elections. While our governments are not perfect, we do believe in and practice representative democracy. When challenged with the violent riots of 1969, Malaysia adopted Rukun Negara as a method to foster national unity with the purpose of creating harmony among various races in the country. The main ambitions of Rukun Negara are unity, democratic way of life, just and equitable society, liberal approach to our diverse heritage, and progressive and modern society. Fast forward to today, it will not be out of place to mention Malaysia Madani, which is a national policy framework introduced by Dr. Sri Anwar Ibrahim, the 10th Prime Minister of Malaysia. Madani is the Malay acronym for SCRIPT, which stands for Sustainability, Care and Compassion, Respect, Innovation, Prosperity and Trust. Economic development should lead to poverty alleviations of masses. Malaysia has come a long way in eradicating poverty. In 1970s, our poverty rate was 50%, and now it is less than 5%. We are on our way to be included in the high-income and developed countries. Malaysia is also home to a religiously and culturally diverse population where Muslims, Christians, Hindus, and other members of the faith community live in harmony. Once again, we have our share of challenges, but we have negotiated these differences in a non-violent manner through dialogue and democratic means. Peace and prosperity in the Muslim world as the theme of your 10th International Conference is a timely and relevant topic for a number of reasons. Firstly, we are witnessing normalization of relations among key Middle East countries. It holds great prospects for the region and beyond. These offer great opportunities to the Muslim Ummah for cooperation, which we should deliberate on to transform them into a better tomorrow for the world. Secondly, the fact that the recent development in the geopolitics of the Middle East also signals important shift in the regional and global power dynamics. With the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the world thought we are reaching the end of history, as argued by Francis Fukuyama. An emergence of a unipolar world was envisioned. That was a premature conclusion. Today, the world is again becoming a multipolar, whereas Fukuyama is now talking about liberalism and its discontent. Thirdly, also on a related note, the rise of populism in various parts of the world has pushed political debate into extreme position, where hyper-nationalism has come to dominate the discourse and challenge liberal politics. Populism not only threatens foundation of a liberal democracy, but it also erodes foundations of economic stability. Populist policies are a threat to long-term prosperity. I would like to reiterate that Malaysia continues to pursue an independent, principled, and pragmatic foreign policy founded on the values of peace, humanity, justice, and equality. The overarching thrust of its foreign policy has been to safeguard Malaysia's sovereignty and national interest, as well as to contribute meaningfully towards a just and equitable community of nations through the conduct of effective diplomacy. Furthermore, as a country with a large Muslim majority, Malaysia also gave importance to the solidarity of the Ummah and the spirit of cooperation among the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC. As Malaysia's Foreign Minister, I reiterate our support for a lasting and peaceful solution to end Palestinian-Israeli conflict consistent with the United Nations resolutions, and I believe that this will contribute towards greater and sustainable peace. In the spirit of our policy and ongoing developments, I believe that we should strive for a world which is based on universal values. I'm glad to note that Islam and Liberty Network also espouses universal values of freedom while being rooted in the Islamic faith. They are religious freedom, there is freedom of religion and faith, expression and practice, economic freedom, open markets, voluntary exchange and limited government, and political freedom, that is liberal democracy and rules of law. I'm sure you will agree that one of the challenges is to understand and explain meanings and context of liberty and freedom, especially in a Muslim majority society. It does not mean freedom to do everything, as is commonly misunderstood, but rather it is freedom from coercion and freedom from violence. For Malaysians, the heart of liberty is inclusion, where we respect and include all tradition and culture. Liberty also brings responsibility which should be transformed into a caring and passionate society. I am confident that the knowledge which this conference will generate should not remain confined to these walls, but it should travel and touch our societies and speak in a language which they can understand. As public intellectuals, it is our responsibility to educate the public at large about these issues. Use of modern technology to reach out public is now critical to create impact of any program. I would like to recognize many excellent and distinguished scholars and academics who have come to present their work and share their thought here. As scholars and researchers, I hope that you will deliberate on the important challenges and problems that we face today. The spirit of Islam demands a fair society which is based on trust, cooperation, and progress, of offering opportunities to all without any discrimination. I look forward to key deliverables coming out from this conference and express my commitment to take them forward to appropriate forums. Finally, I wish this conference a great success. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, His Excellency, for the insightful keynote address. Now, I would like to invite His Excellency Datuk Muhammad bin Alamin, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, on stage to receive a token of appreciation. I would like to invite Lord Syed Kamall on stage to present the token of appreciation to His Excellency. Thank you, Lord Syed Kamall, His Excellency Datuk Muhammad Alamin, and Mr. Ali Salman.